One thing that Nintendo is usually super secretive about is how exactly they make their iconic video games, only rarely showing what goes on behind the scenes, probably due to the fear that other companies might copy their obviously successful formula. Through thorough research and sparse releases by the company, I was able to scrape together some of this content that was actually left out and remained unused in the final products, but was at one point or another meant to be added. Here, creating today's video, specifically looking at removed content from every Super Mario Bros. Game. Before I get started on this video, I hope you all subscribe to my channel, hitting that bell to stay notified when I upload new videos. The very first game to come out in the mainline series is Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985, where development for this classic title started in the fall of the previous year. Around that same time, Shigeru Miyamoto would also start work on The Legend of Zelda, wanting to mirror that experience with Mario, one being a top-down adventure puzzler, and the other being a fast-paced platformer, having the idea at the time of a blocky character jumping through different environments. This obviously would eventually become Mario, with Miyamoto and a select few Nintendo artists producing concepts of what the character would look like and how he would behave in this 8-bit world. Through thecuttingroomfloor.com, I was able to find some really early concept art that includes things like different poses that we don't quite see in the finished product, a weird cloud platform that I think is meant to be rideable and resembles one that is found in the third NES entry, a very early design for the Fire Flower having a P on it, probably as it was originally related to the Piranha Plant, Toad, who looks like he's giving us the middle finger, which is a little bit rude, this dragon that most likely would have popped out of pipes and may even be an early concept for Yoshi, these crab dudes from the Mario Bros. Arcade game, an early design for Bowser, aka King Koopa, which looks sort of awful, and I'm glad they changed this one. And finally, the title screen being green instead of the iconic red that we know and love. Looking really off as Mario's red color has become synonymous with the character. The next to be released in Western markets on the NES is Super Mario Bros. 2 in 1988. Being a strange entry as it's technically a tech demo based on Mario called Yumi Kojo Doki Doki Panic, being scarcely available in Japan on the Famicom, and later being transformed into a Mario title as the true sequel was deemed too hard for the younger Nintendo USA audience and too similar to the first, as there's not really any upgrade in graphics or gameplay. This means that the Super Mario Bros. 2 that we all know and love is a bit of a lie, as Nintendo at that time didn't even know if this one would be canon to the series or not, as they had this weird deal with the Fuji television network to develop this game and didn't know what to do with the IP. In the end, they went with this sort of Middle Eastern, didn't even technically start off as Mushroom Kingdom inhabitants. The Shy Guy, the Birdo, the Sparks, the Pokies, and honestly many other characters and bad guys are all originally from something that might have been Mario but wasn't exactly made for it. And that's definitely shown through many of the changes between the versions to make it fit way better. When I learned this as an adult, this really made a lot of things make sense for me, as when I was a kid, something always felt off about this title, as it's clearly such an outlier in the series, and has gameplay that isn't really seen anywhere else, which is weird and awesome. The final of the original NES trilogy came out in North America in 1991, having some minor things left out, beginning with Yoshi, who apparently would have been included in this title. Miyamoto really wanted Mario to ride a horse in this entry, but the programmers thought that it'd be too advanced for what they could put into the cartridge at this time. So he changed the idea to a sort of dinosaur buddy whose neck could bend down and attack enemies in front of you. As hard as they tried, they just couldn't put him in, and that idea sat with the team until their next big entry, Super Mario World, where you can see the influence Yoshi has on that game, so yeah. Also, I want to look at a trailer that apparently played on GTV in Japan, showcasing the aspects of Super Mario Bros. 3, where you'll notice many differences not only in the colors of the platforms, but even their placements and at times exclusions. With this all going down in 1987, which was a full year before it'd even be released in Japan. Sometimes I still can't believe there was 3 years between the Japanese and American releases of this game, and the hype and legend at that time about this masterpiece of a game must have been crazy. Something that was seen through the release of the Wizard movie, which was about playing this game, which even furthered things. Next up, we're going to look at some early build footage for Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which was graphically very different, but the gameplay is relatively familiar. I'm confused whether the artwork in this early version was intentionally made janky, or if it was just such an early build that they rushed it out to investors that things weren't even drawn yet. As everything you see here is basically a placeholder asset and wasn't even meant to be in the finished product. Also, you'll notice that the blocks look way more like they did in Super Mario Bros. 3, having much sharper corners in comparison to the smoother, rounder ones in this world entry. The best change in my opinion is to Yoshi's character model, as the first draft looked a lot more like a gecko than a dinosaur, having a squished face and a derpy look that isn't as cute as the real thing. There's also this weird beige blobby pupa thing that I'm not sure even what it's supposed to be, so if you have more info on that, then let me know in the comments. This game went through a lot of changes, so many so that I can't really list each one in this video. So I do really suggest you visit thecuttingroomfloor.com, as it's a cool place that archives niche info on your favorite games, so just check it out. The sequel to Super Mario World would also be released on the SNES, and would be titled Yoshi's Island, actually being more like a prequel as it explores the roots of Mario and his dino pal, and how the entire population of them would rescue him as a baby. What's weird, however, is that during pre-production, Nintendo seemed to imagine the character looking a lot less like a baby version of Mario, and more like just a random baby that has nothing to do at all with the series, being blonde and wearing a strange blue hat with a pacifier in his mouth. Now, this is in contrast to other proposed designs that looked a lot more like our mustachioed hero, where in one version there's a baby that has a literal mustache and a big nose, looking almost as if Mario was cosplaying as a baby, and not that he's actually a small infant. Now, in my opinion, the weirdest thing left out of this game is the proposed Bone Yoshi, which I guess would have been sort of a zombified / dead version of your friend that I'm assuming would have been brought back to life via Kamek's magic. Also weird is that enemies would have been able to ride these dino bones, being able to jump just as Yoshi would, which I think would have led to some really morbid and trippy feeling gameplay that I'm kinda glad they left out. The first game to be released within the 3D realm is Super Mario 64 for the N64. And because this game was so revolutionary, Nintendo had to go through many steps in coming up with a completed product. Meaning there are many builds of this game that were shown off and tested until they could get everything right. The first is what was shown off during the Shoshinkai 1995 event, also known as Nintendo Space World, which was sort of a convention where Nintendo could show off new consoles, accessories, and games, which was a great way to get the word out at the time before the internet. You can just tell from this base version that production on it was most likely rushed to reach the deadline of being showcased in this place. And the colors that do show up are very muted and bland, to the point where it starts to affect the feel of the courses. Also, the paintings that lead to the levels are really weird, as they're just sort of attached to the ground so you can walk straight into them. Really showing me the evolution the developers must have went through, as they were probably worried at first that people wouldn't understand how to get into them, but after shows like this and separate testing, they probably realized the strangeness of them and the unknowing of which ones leads to where is something that made them so great. The next version of the game that would be shown would be part of the March 1996 build that was part of a press release kit that was sent out to different computer / video game magazines at that time. This is way closer to the final title, but there are still some small differences like the color of the water, the reflections in some of the mirrors not totally being there, and lastly enemies being way goofier, looking a lot less menacing than what they would be. The final pre-release version that we're going to look at was ready for E3 in 1996, with Nintendo developers stating that the game was about 80% complete at that point. And it shows that the graphics started to look way sharper, and the majority of the stylistic choices would be locked in, although maybe things like color and some sharpness would be tweaked a bit. Nothing much else to say, as this one's really close to what we know and love today. It's just interesting to see how much Nintendo showed this game off, as nowadays they wouldn't even show any gameplay at all until the title is basically 100% complete. The next game to come out, also based within the 3D realm, is Super Mario Sunshine for the Nintendo GameCube, where if you know anything about its Space World 2001 trailer, then you'll know that this entry changed drastically from then until its actual release date in July of 2002. Something I sort of already talked about in my first unused content video, but it's so crazy that I really just want to show it off again. Honestly, it's almost as if it's an entirely different experience and they decided along the way to scrap what they had and start fresh. As literally nothing even looks similar at all, other than maybe the flood, but we don't even see it used in the trailer, so who really even knows? Going even further, this possibly isn't even a real trailer and was just made as a sort of tech demo to show off what the spirit of Super Mario Sunshine was going to be without actually showing any real gameplay. I feel like this is something that game companies used to do all the time. They used to show gameplay at their events, but it ended up just being a cinematic created on a computer with no actual player. And the trailer is really grainy with not that much footage out there. I'm just gonna say that it doesn't look finished, and it probably wasn't. This is something that will come up a bit more in this video, as at times it's obvious when they're trying to cater to investors, so they had something to show off in return for, well, you know, money. Nintendo would eventually return the series to its 2D roots, with the release of New Super Mario Bros. For the dual-screen system, where in my research, I discovered that the overworld map was supposed to look a lot different, more akin to what was seen in New Super Mario Bros. Wii rather than in this game. As you can see, selecting your world was meant to be more in the spinning disc style than in the flat outlay that we ended up getting. Probably changed due to the inclusion of secret worlds that branch off from other worlds, which couldn't properly be represented on a 3D plane. Not much else to talk about from this title, but before we move on, I also want to mention the art style that was originally planned out, as it made the game look almost like a sequel to Super Mario World 2, where almost every asset was drawn by hand and manually put into the game. This was seen in the 2004 E3 trailer, which again, I think was meant to be less of an actual trailer and more of just a tech demo showcase, touching on the themes of what's going on in the title and what fans could expect from this new realm of 2D gameplay. Next up is the space-based Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii. They came out for the system in 2007, where again, there was a trailer for E3 that year that showcased what they had done so far in that title, and there definitely are a few differences. In that, there was a visit by Mario to something called Star World, where he started by collecting music notes along a trail of gigantic eggs with these weird curly vine things coming out of them. Really odd, as these do not look like Yoshi eggs at all, at least the ones that we're used to, and instead I'd say they look way more like Easter eggs, so I'm confused by the reference. After you use the launch star, you're taken to a few rocky planets that eventually lead to the place we all recognize as the Good Egg Galaxy starting area, adding a whole beginning part that honestly I think would have added nicely to the gameplay. Also, the HUD is a bit different, as it seems like you can either only hold 100 star bits at a time, or there initially were only going to be 100 star bits in a level. And they must have realized that it's more fun to collect a lot of them by using the motion controls, so that changed pretty quickly. The second in the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series would come out for the Wii near Christmas time in 2009. With the earliest footage Nintendo would show off of the game would be at E3 earlier that year, where it does look like a lot had been completed on the title, but it was nowhere near finished. What's interesting is that you can tell that the game was literally built using the same assets and maybe even the same engine as New Super Mario Bros. For the DS, as a lot of the obstacles like blocks, pipes, and even coins have a rougher design that make them look way more like that original title. Also, a lot of the sounds were apparently pulled as well, which someone noticed as they're still in the game files, which is really odd, making me feel like this was rushed and maybe made in under a year, which is kind of insane to think about. But honestly, if they had the technology like Mario Maker back then maybe they just used that, and it was really more about updating the graphics and creating new sounds. One of the biggest removals, however, is that there is a red Yoshi in the trailer, and in the game that was released, there is no red Yoshi at all. A switch up I don't really understand, as it's not like this is a weird color for the character, as this variant has basically showed up in every other game that a Yoshi shows up in, so I don't get it. Thankfully, there's a ton of concept art available for the space-based sequel, Super Mario Galaxy 2 for the Wii, including some pictures floating around out there, where there's a really cool costume that Mario could have worn if you collected the Cloud Flower. Here, he would have been dressed in a sort of ancient Middle Eastern style, almost looking like the Sultan from Aladdin, while also being all grayed out, meaning that he has a gray beard and white hair, making him look old and wise. This was obviously scrapped along the way, and the design that we know was chosen instead, looking like it might have been drawn around the same time, so there must have been a decision to go with the safer option. Also, it looks like there was going to be an early idea for Mario to ride a sort of airship boat thing with a house attached, looking suspiciously like the Odyssey vehicle from Super Mario Odyssey. Up next is Super Mario 3D Land. They came out for the 3DS in 2011, where in one of the game's earliest trailers shown at the Game Developers Conference, the name was much different, being called simply just Super Mario. Not only that, but the logo was atrocious, as the word super in the logo was all grayed out with a gray border around everything, which for some reason is just not easy on the eyes at all. Which, even for an early concept art type thing, is awful, and I can't believe it was even considered, to be honest. The next time the game was shown off, the logo would be much better, and this would be in the trailer that was for E3 of that year. Now having a black border and much better colors. Although still keeping the word super a super simple white, which does look nice. Now, I'm under the impression that it's possible that Nintendo didn't care about the title or the logo at the time, as they knew that the real thing would just be called Super Mario 3D Land. Maybe not including the full name in an attempt to cover up that this game could be played in 3D on a 3DS system. As even in the trailer, there's no indication of what console this was going to be released on, which is kind of weird if you think about it. They probably just didn't want any leaks at all, and wanted this to be a big reveal at E3 of that year. Playing everything safe, something Nintendo always did and still will always do in the future. Alright, so the last game we're going to look at in this video is Super Mario Bros. Wonder for the Nintendo Switch. Only because the games after Super Mario 3D Land don't quite have any pre-release info out yet, so maybe in the future there'll be more released. You know how Nintendo works, they're very secretive with things. Where in this title, it looks like at first Nintendo was testing out 4 different title screens and logos for the game, as clearly they didn't know how to properly market it. In my opinion, they would eventually settle on the best design, which is the more psychedelic one, really giving the feel of a trippy vibe which matches perfectly with the Wonder Flower and its crazy effects. I hate the other 3, I think the logo is too plain and has that really wired effect which I don't love. But there's nothing really much else to say about this, there's not a lot of information out about this game. Like I said, maybe in the future there will be more, but you know, you have to wait for like an encyclopedia or an art book. We'll see. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this very different one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course subscribe to my channel. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!